Ahoy hoy gang, if this is your first time with us, welcome. And if you're joining us from a previous video, hey, we love to see it and I hope you're doing well. It's season 12, the penultimate season. It's hard to believe we're so close to the end and yet still have so much ground left to cover. We're even getting our first dedicated Min episode. Though if I had to describe the season, I'd say it's definitely the sitcom season. It's like you can almost tell where the laugh tracks are supposed to be. So, without further ado, what worked? What failed? What basket-destroying infestations will be curtailed? There's only one way to find out. There's no better time to delve into Season 12. Bobby takes an interest in football and starts watching it uninterrupted, much to Hank's delight as he and the gang try to nurture this love of the game. They decide to take him to see the Longhorns play off for a chance to play in the Rose Bowl. Yeah, it's Hank and the gang go to a game with Bobby. Bobby wanders off into a box seat. They get used to being in the posh boxes and living in the lap of luxury. However, it's actually a former Nebraska coach's box, and the sub-coach calls asking for him to make a call. If Hank sabotages them now, the Longhorns win and he can give his boy a chance to see them play in the Rose Bowl. He already got him used to all the weird football traditions, and sure enough, he tells the Nebraska team a bunk play that no one would ever expect because it's just that dumb, and sure enough, it works. Nebraska wins, and Hank did it. Now, Hank and the gang have to escape the stadium with Bobby in tow and navigate giant angry mobs and switching sides just to get through it. Meanwhile, Peggy absolutely loses it at the game on the TV and terrifies Luanne. I just love that. At its core, that's really all this episode is. There's nothing deeper, nothing more complex, no real deeper meaning. And if you think at all on Bobby's history of being a mascot or even a player briefly, it'd make you question why Hank thought Bobby hated football, but it's fine. It's Hank desperate to share one of his hobbies with his son and genuinely being excited and determined to give Bobby the perfect day. Bobby was super stoked to go to the Cowboys training camp. He was throwing a ball with his dad. He was wearing a jersey. They have shared these things before. If you think on it, it falls apart. But don't. Just don't. The episode is great, and honestly, I'd say this is arguably one of the strongest season premieres of the show, and it knows its audience perfectly. This episode premiered in September, right after Football Sunday, and gives you a classic father and son adventure focused around one of America's greatest pastimes. I don't know, this felt like a classic King of the Hill episode that, while it does have a lot to love, also showcases one of the biggest problems with this season. There's just empty dialogue. There's empty scenes. This episode has so much padding of nothing in so many parts that it feels like it could have been 11 minutes long and hit all the notes it needed to hit. Scenes are lagged out, they're dragged on unnecessarily, people will just look over at something for 2 seconds too long, but all those seconds do add up. That being said, the rest of the episode makes up for the bits that started to drag in the second half. Sweet Smell of Excess is a father and son bonding 9 out of 10. In order for the teachers to be able to afford a vacation, Principal Moss sets up soda machines in the school that all the kids naturally get addicted to. Pay teachers a living wage, so nobody thinks this is a good idea, maybe. Bobby hates being single when Joseph gets a girlfriend, and he blames his loneliness on the soda that he's gotten addicted to. And so he riles the students into action, and they protest the soda machines. Sure enough, Principal Moss gets them uninstalled, and Bobby is approached by junior journalist Olivia, played by Renee Bell, who would also show up in The Good Family. She tells Bobby he's the man that cares and wants him to go bigger and bolder to really spark revolution like good old Che Guevara. Hank hears that Bobby protested and is ashamed of his son for not taking the necessary steps before protest. Hank is upset that Bobby protested. Do you know how many times Hank has protested throughout the series? Remember when he protested alongside Bobby at the quarry, or when he and the other small business owners got their kazoos out to harass Megalomart before it blew up? Hank has protested and walked off constantly, but the moment Bobby does it to get soda machines removed, it's a problem. Well, the power goes to Bobby's head, and when Moss installs a ticker for an energy drink, he stages a walkout that quickly devolves into a bunch of 12-year-olds looting Arlen. Hank proceeds to scare them about the very real consequences of protesting, and they all run along as Bobby realizes he never wanted any of that power to begin with, and he'd never be radical enough for Olivia to be happy. I'm genuinely surprised Connie didn't do more of this episode. It just seems like a waste to not include her in an episode like this. Some pros of the episode? I absolutely love the teachers and Principal Moss. They're very obviously antagonistic towards the kids, and that just kinda works for me. The vocal deliveries are all top-notch, and I mean, for what it is, it's at least acted very well, even if some of Bobby's lines just feel weird. I will say this, I have never wanted a B story to be updated more. Dale has a quote journal that he wants to fill with all the musings of the gang in the alley. I need to see this reimagined in the modern age. I'm begging you. Give me Dale trying and failing to do a podcast with them all. 4 white guys in a podcast. It's practically written in the stars. Do it, you cowards. The cons? Yeah, pretty much everything else of the episode. This episode is just a weird, confusing fever dream. It doesn't make sense if you think on it, and it just escalates so quickly for no reason. Bobby Ray just doesn't do anything. You feel bad for Bobby, sure, but then the episode just kinda ends. An episode like this needs a memorable conclusion to go out on. Here it's literally just, women be crazy, cut to credits. Bobby Ray is a sugar high crashing 4 out of 10. This is a tricky episode. Yeah. Joseph and the football players select Bobby to help them for their big powderpuff game, where the boys become the cheerleaders and do wild skits while the girls play the football game. Bobby doesn't want to help out and thinks it's cheap, even though his dad is actually excited that he got the role. Meanwhile, Peggy starts schmoozing with the PTA and gets in tight with the PTA president and, by choice, stay-at-home mom, Alexis, played by Lisa Edelstein, and make sure to check out House on Fox, where she plays Dr. Cuddy. It's all connected if you pay attention to it. But don't think about it, just consume media. Again, really funny how the cross-promotion is just kinda baked in. But it's definitely not the only time Lisa Edelstein has done voice acting. She was also Shari in American Dad, and Kia, Tenzin's sister, in Korra, on top of the deluge of other credits to her name. Bobby starts really loving doing powderpuff when he sees the football players actually listening to everything he has to say, and yeah, he puts everything he's learned about comedy to work for the team. This is also probably the best Coach Kleehammer episode in the series that just has fun with his character and lets Toby Huss just let loose with him. I genuinely love it. I really truly love that Bobby is experimenting and pushing his comedic talent and sharing it with his newfound friends and compatriots. But of course, Bobby can't have anything nice, and Alexis declares Powderpuff sexist and wants it canceled. I don't know. Obviously, personally, I don't see a problem with it. They're just being dumb boys for one game and having fun and entertaining the crowd. But I'm sure there's more layers to it that I just don't have any desire to get into. The episode is cheer factor with extra steps. They get banned from performing, but sure enough, they sneak props and perform in the bleachers as credits roll. You've seen the episode before, but again, I think the fact that it's centered around Bobby actually using all the comedic talents he's acquired through the series is a wonderful touch. People know Bobby is funny, they trust Bobby, and he leads them without it going to his head. Now granted, it's the episode literally right after he led the school in a walkout, but don't think about it. Consume media. Don't worry about it. The Powderpuff Boys is fine. Naturally, the Peggy and Alexis pseudo-B story doesn't really do anything to benefit the episode as a whole, and I really wish there wasn't that artificial conflict shoehorned in at the last minute. Have one of Alexis's kids bring up the issue. Maybe her daughter has to play in the Powderpuff game and doesn't think it's fair. Again, there's a dozen ways to make small changes for the episode to work, and they go with none of them. The Powerpuff Boys is a spirited 7 out of 10. There's a heat wave in Texas. With it, Bobby, Connie, and Joseph get summer passes for a water park and proceed to get bullied by the surfer kids that guard the artificial wave machine and their adult friend and park employee, Bodie. When they keep getting pushed around, Boomhauer goes with the kids to set things straight, and naturally, he's the cool guy surfer of the group and completely eats it and wipes out. Meanwhile, Bill's car breaks down on the side of the road, so he tries to signal for someone to pull over, and they think he's just waving, so he becomes the Heat Waver, a friendly face on those miserable, excruciatingly hot days. He literally lets himself cook alive so he doesn't let his fans down. He is out there waving to the point Hank has to carry him home and he is covered in severe burns. Boomhauer goes to the beach to find himself, and when he finds his center, he goes back to the park and proceeds to beat the bullies up with his surfboard until everyone gets to join in on the fun. I gotta admit, the more I think on the second half of the episode, the more it just kinda works. If this were a traditional surfer movie or really any of those rec center gets torn down unless you win the big whatever tournament movies, he'd win with his skill and humble them. He would take that moral high ground. But life doesn't work that way. Sometimes you just need to knock some kids in the water and do your own thing. I used to hate the episode when I was a kid, and it felt like it dragged and never really went anywhere. Now that I'm older, I get it. It's a heat wave. People are always going to act erratically in the heat. Four-wave intersection perfectly exemplifies that almost restlessness that comes from an unbearable summer and gives us a strong Boomhauer episode that resolves itself in a unique way that's anything but cookie cutter. Four-wave intersection is a most righteous 8 out of 10. This is an episode I feel would have worked better in an earlier season. Hank, Peggy, Luanne, and Lucky are going to a hibachi restaurant when Dee Dee drops Cotton off and he agrees to babysit Bobby while they go to dinner. Cotton tosses cold lasagna on the ground and then takes Bobby to the hibachi place, where he begins to have a war flashback, attacks the chef, and collapses onto the hibachi grill as the sprinklers kick on. This is the last episode of Cotton. He would appear in later episodes, but yeah. The episode is all about Hank dealing with saying goodbye to his dad while Peggy coaxes him. Meanwhile, Dale is following Cotton's orders to blow up Hank's weak shed. Dale just wants a reason to be weird. Oh, and Peggy doesn't want Bobby to see Cotton like this, so Luanne and Lucky start parenting him to practice for their kid, and I get that it's supposed to be funny, but it really just makes me worry about their little girl. Also, Peggy doesn't let Bobby say goodbye to his grandpa, someone that loved and adored him. Sure, he was a horrible father, but he was a doting grandpa. Cotton is still miserable on his deathbed and mocks Hank over and over until Peggy just tears into him, and I think that's why I have such a problem with this being as late in the series as it is. Peggy has radically transformed through the years and she's almost unrecognizable at this point, but this episode very much feels like the old protective Peggy again. She tears into Cotton and he takes his last breath. Death Picks Cotton, much like Four-Wave Intersection, shows that you don't always get that nice wrapped with a bow ending. Hank doesn't get the closure he wanted. Cotton doesn't give him that one last attaboy or an I'm proud of you. The episode tries to juggle the weight of Hank losing his dad and Lucky rolling in a tire with Bobby down a hill. Doesn't quite work. I don't know. Death Picks Cotton is heartfelt and is a turning of the page, but it just feels hollow when you know there won't be a lasting impact through the season. That being said, Toby Huss will still be around. He has other characters to play. But it's just like, when Buckley blew up, you were still feeling the aftershocks almost up to the season finale. Here, it's not even a two-parter when a major character is written off. A character that has been the same since the very first season. I don't know. It feels cheaper than it should have been. Death Picks Cotton is a send-off salute. 7 out of 10. When the meat Hank gets from Megalomart is tough and flavorless, he starts to smuggle food from a co-op because it's just so fresh and flavorful. However, when he joins up, everyone starts to count on him to run the co-op, and he turns the struggling business into a profiting powerhouse while his family enjoys delicious grass-fed meat and organic fruits and vegetables. However, when Hank does too well with the co-op, Megalomart wants to buy them out, and they actually take the money and run. Hank, not wanting to lose his quality food, tries to keep cows and chickens in his backyard, and yeah, he does eventually fail. He has to have Appleseed smuggle the cows away to a safe and happy farm where they can grow and be free. I mean this in the nicest way possible. If we never see Appleseed again after this episode, that's totally okay. And honestly, I don't think we do. Having him be Hank's confidant and taking the cattle to a safe place and sending that last postcard at the end of the episode is actually a kind of beautiful bookend to one of the most entertaining side characters in the show. The rest of the episode hasn't aged well. Ha ha, the co-op is run by a bunch of crystal-loving, sunbeam-enjoying people named Sunshine. Hee-haw, they're so wacky. But other than that, yeah, they sold healthy food that is good and good for you. It's the same stuff that people were obsessed with in The Good Family. Like, you can't bash it too hard. And the great thing is, Hank is on board with co-ops, and it makes sense for his character. Of course, he wants fresh, healthy ingredients. I don't know. Like, I should hate this episode. It's predictable and very simple, but like, it's Hank pursuing good food. It's Hank fighting for his principles, and it just makes me respect the episode that much more. When he's finding ways to fix displays or open another register when they're swamped, it's not him talking down to people, it's just using common sense to fix a problem, and when he does get desperate towards the end, yeah, he does something dumb, but that's okay. That's on brand for him. Raise the stakes, raises the bar, and I'm gonna pat myself on the back for that line. It gives us just a genuine, pure Hank episode where Hank alone deals with everything. I would just like to say again that Dave Allen did a beautiful job bringing Appleseed to life, and he really is an underappreciated actor and comedian that did elevate the show every time he was on. Raise the Stakes is a fresh and savory 9 out of 10. Gang, this is why this season frustrates me. I'm sitting here in a groove, just kind of jamming along to King of the Hill. Sure, Bobby Ray was a weird mess, but it's not a symptom of a bigger disease, right? Right? Like, there was a good chunk of episodes before this that lull you into a false sense of security. They got you all complacent, and wham! Smack you with Tears of an Inflatable Clown. Tears of an Inflatable Clown has just been the choice, but way, way, way worse. I'm trying to wrap my head around this episode and make it make sense, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's get into it. Bobby wants to throw a carnival and is able to convince the student board with a well thought out and thoroughly researched pitch that Hank helps him on. Bobby gets his carnival and he has to lead his team to get it done. Hank even tells him about the two types of bosses people interact with, the friendly boss and the boss that gets stuff done. Now that right there is enough for an episode. That gives you potential conflict where the kids won't listen to Bobby and he's got to be the hard-as-nails boss. He's got to get his friends in line, which is a difficult thing to do when you're 12 and not used to being in a position of power. Oh, sorry, I should probably talk about the B story too. Lucky refuses to go to the hospital and Hank and the gang have to chase him down and catch him, even after he slathers himself in Vaseline and get that man's hand fixed. It's just to kill a Ladybird's A story if you switch Dale with Lucky. But hey, it's fun. Tom Petty is having fun. That's really all that matters. It's some brevity to the episode. Alright, let's go back and see what's going on with Bobby. So, when Bobby does struggle to control his group, a diversity counselor sent by the superintendent decides to take charge and make all the kids feel ancestral guilt for the sins of their ancestors, throwing the entire room into a depression where they decide to give up the carnival in favor of going on stage and airing the sins of their family for some reason. I think the biggest problem I have with the episode is when you compare it to Spin the Choice, it makes no sense. In Spin the Choice, Bobby jumped to his conclusions, and while sure he was manipulated by John Redcorn, it was mostly his research that led him to his belief system. Here, a school-appointed diversity counselor is throwing the carnival into disarray and teaching the kids about all the isms in an after-school planning committee. Why? They're doing star-bellied sneech exercises. Why? It's just like, okay, let's say that him getting involved is the joke, and like, ho, they were gonna have this simple story, but then this happens. Then why is the resolution the way it is? Oh, during their big stage performance of all their sins, you know what fixes it? Oh, all the carnival equipment left conveniently outside for Hank and the gang to fire up and distract the kids. Like, what is this episode? What is the point of it? Your ancestors did something bad? And? Is it a commentary on diversity counselors in schools? Did you have one? I sure didn't. School counselors, absolutely, but nothing like this. I mean, this is an affront to everything that King of the Hill is. If the B story didn't exist, it may very well be a 1 out of 10 that only gets that 1 because the actors are trying. This may genuinely be the most infuriatingly bad episode of the series. Hank's bully is bland and a nothing burger. This feels like fake outrage mixed with atrocious writing for the sake of nothing. Tears of an Inflatable Clown is a sorrowful 2 out of 10. I can't tell you what a breath of fresh air this episode is. Like, when I was a kid and watched this show out of order, I genuinely enjoyed this episode. It was one of my favorites. Revisiting it for this review, whole new appreciation for it. The Men Who Knew Too Much is, you guessed it, a men episode. Not a con episode featuring men, straight up just men, and it's great! Nine Rivers Country Club needs proficient shooters for their skeet shooting team. Min is a great shot but doesn't know anything about skeet shooting, so she tries to join a local gun club, and when there's only one available, she begrudgingly joins Dale's gun club to get her groove on. I haven't talked about her much, but Lauren Tom really does put 110% to the character she plays, but Min especially. Min could have been just this snarky one-dimensional character, but she plays her with such love that she really does come to life. It's wild that Lauren Tom does both Min and Amy in Futurama. Min looks down on the dumb hillbilly ways of Dale and his gun club, but as they fawn over how cool she is and what a great shot, she finds herself softening up around them. They become her friends, and she becomes their president. She gets her spot on the Nine Rivers team, and when the gun club feels betrayed and think that she abandoned them, they go to Nine Rivers for revenge and instead realize why she was doing everything and go to cheer her on as she goes on to win, and she and Khan become Nine Rivers Country Club members. Not only do I love that Min was the one that got them into Nine Rivers, but her relationship with the gun club is just so god-dang wholesome. It's tragic we don't have much of this Dale left in the season, but it's great to see it while we have it. He cares about Min and he wants to see her succeed, and he's not actively sabotaging anyone or just tormenting them. Oh, right, the B story. It's such a dumb B story, but I'm gonna be honest, it has probably the best dumb conclusion imaginable. Bobby fails at taking the trash out because someone already used their bins for their trash, so Hank has to figure out who's been using their trash cans. He tears open the bags and can't figure it out until Lucky comes in and goes, "That's my trash," and waxes poetic about seeing your life lived splayed in front of you. I wanted to be mad at it, but Tom Petty's delivery is just so earnest, how could I be? Where Tears of an Inflatable Clown was an affront to all things creative, The Men Who Knew Too Much legitimately almost brought a tear to my eye. It's just such a genuine episode that has a ton to love. The Men Who Knew Too Much is a straight shooting 10 out of 10. The B story? Bill gets a cowboy hat that gets caught by the wind and blows onto Khan's head. They spend the rest of their time trying to recreate the scene so they can put it on YouTube with Peggy's help. That's it. That's the whole thing. The A story? When Nancy is struggling to make ends meet and doesn't know what to do, she asks Dale to get a real job and tries to get Hank to take him to a vacation to learn a new craft. Hank gives him a ton of options and Dale refuses, opting to go with his one true love: basket weaving. Dale is hopeless and talentless when it comes to basket weaving, while it comes naturally to Hank and his train-loving tendencies. He quickly becomes the instructor's favorite and partakes in a little ribbing of Dale for being horrible at basket weaving, and Dale is convinced he has to take Hank out. However, after failing to take Hank out, Hank convinces the instructor to fake an infestation that threatens the baskets for Dale to do something that he knows how to do. He takes care of the fake infestation, impresses the other students, and becomes a vocational instructor as his new job, teaching future exterminators, which admittedly would be a great thing for Dale to do. Dreamweaver is a Hank and Dale story that, sure, it plays out exactly how you think it would, it's also a perfect reflection of their friendship. We find out that Dale didn't have a lot of friends, but he found camaraderie in baskets, so they mean something to him. As weird as this is to say, I have no evidence for this at all, Dreamweaver feels like the last true beacon of light to the season. We're gonna get into it. We still have well over a half a season to go, but yeah, this feels like a peak of the season. I adored this episode when I was a kid, and now I think it's waned just from marathoning the show and seeing the inconsistency of Dale. That being said, it's a strong Hank and Dale episode that has solid jokes, mostly from the instructor, played brilliantly by David Herman. Dreamweaver is a solidly woven 8 out of 10. Rain cancels Bobby's baseball game, and when the family comes home, the house has been ransacked by an unknown assailant. Hank files a police report, and we get the return of Officer Brown, played by the late legend Fred Willard. This would weirdly enough kick off his season-long arc? Yeah, the cop has an arc. It's weird. Well, it starts to rain again, and when Hank hears someone making a mess, he goes out and discovers that it's Ladybird that's tearing things up as she freaks out around thunder. Hank tries to calm her down, but she turns around and bites him. She's at risk of being put down, so Hank calls a dog spiritualist who isn't a ripoff of Cesar Millan, the dog whisperer, at all. Officer Brown really wants to shoot a dog. I mean, he's just itching for a reason to pull the trigger. Doesn't all this sound fun? Doesn't all this sound funny? Want to guess what the B story is? There isn't one. This is all you get. Well, the dog spiritualist takes Ladybird to an old folks home and has her wander around as another storm rolls in and Animal Control and Officer Brown come in ready to hunt a bloodthirsty bloodhound. Meanwhile, Luanne is telling a woman that when she passes and gets reborn to cry a certain way so she knows if she was reborn as her daughter or not. What happened to Luanne? Is there an unaddressed gas leak in her house or something? Like, sure, she's always been out there, but this is getting kinda ridiculous. Well, with the storm rolling in and Hank having to find Ladybird, he finds her with an old woman and she proceeds to collapse onto her lap for pets like a good girl. Turns out that sometime in the episode, Ladybird had gone deaf. She couldn't hear the thunder anymore and was able to, not get put down by the trigger-happy officer, which should be social commentary, but I don't think it is. Just a coincidence, I guess. Doggone Crazy is the King of the Hill equivalent of ego death. It's an episode that makes you hear a sizzle in your ears and smell toast. You keep thinking you missed a joke. I have revisited this episode 3 times in the last 4 days trying to see if maybe, just maybe, I'm the problem. Maybe I just don't get the joke, but there just isn't one. It's just Hank worried about Ladybird, which is fine, don't get me wrong, it doesn't go any further. Like with To Kill a Ladybird, there was actually a feeling of suspense and stakes. Here it just feels artificial. Like they're making a horror movie for geriatrics. You can't get too scary, otherwise they might go. Doggone Crazy does transition from scene to scene and does have a start, middle, and end. It doesn't do anything with that, but yeah, they're there, and the dog whisperer is a person that exists. That's the episode. Like, the dog spiritualist scenes just dragged on for way too long. Now, walk around the cul-de-sac with a cane. Okay, now do it with a top hat. But it's gonna take the exact same amount of time. And it's just drags so much. Anyone else smell toast? Doggone Crazy is a dreary 4 out of 10. During the 2000s, there was a huge push against trans fats as they were harmful to the body and you could blame them for a large part of childhood obesity. But you can also blame that on soda machines in schools and depression from generational guilt, all things addressed in this season. The FDA did ban trans fats beyond a certain amount being added to food, so it is a bit of a tricky argument to have, but that didn't stop King of the Hill, no sir. Ted Wasanasong pushes to get trans fats banned in Ireland, which would cripple Sugarfoots, but make them a shining mecca of progressive thinking. Super! Buck decides to open an illegal food truck to sell people the trans fat-laden food they're forbidden from having. He's even able to recruit Hank to fight unjust rules he doesn't agree with. He works the food truck as his form of protest against a ban he doesn't stand by. Man, that sure doesn't sound like the kind of guy that would hate Bobby protesting something he found unjust. At this point, Bobby Ray is the outlier, and I'm fine with that. I think the reason I love this episode so much is that even though Hank is doing something categorically illegal, he refuses to let their quality drop. Everyone washes their hands regularly, wears hairnets, and keeps their space sanitary. Nancy is on the case and tries to hunt them down to show their crime. Peggy loves that Hank is a criminal and can't get enough of him. The episode is going well, and then Rooster shows up and shows a glaring problem with this season. Rooster is an old enemy of Buck's from Arkansas. He shows up out of nowhere to compete against Buck's trans fat truck with a truck of his own. Rooster is played by David Herman, and yeah, he has the creative depth of the Noid, the little gremlin that would destroy your pizza. Rooster could have been voiced by a guest star. The dog spiritualist could have been voiced by a guest star. The diversity counselor? Make them a guest star that can at least give the roles some nuance. Nope, David Herman for all of them. The man has a great range, don't get me wrong, but it's a failure of the show to make him carry that much creative weight constantly. Oh, and we have part 2 of Officer Brown's story. You see, last time he wanted to put a dog down. Now he's getting bribed by Buck to stay out of it. Yeah! What a character. I'm kind of upset that of all the people that get a season-long arc, it's him. But I mean, I'll say it, only Fred Willard could play this character. Only Fred Willard could be Riley's teacher in the Boondocks. If you know, you know. The man was incredibly talented and makes the skeevy guy have at least some entertainment to him. Everyone gets sick from Rooster's food truck eventually, and Hank turns to Nancy after dreaming of Tom Landry, George Washington, and Abe Lincoln fighting Krauts in WWII, and admits to Nancy that he wants to get out. And sure enough, by the end of the episode, trans fats are unbanned and the credits roll. You get a crazy dream sequence, musical interlude, great writing, solid jokes. Like if Rooster just had a little bit more personality, it'd be a perfect episode in my eyes. It's just genuinely fun and feels like something old Hank would do, and does prove me wrong for my Dreamweaver comment. There are still a couple episodes that are worth checking out. Trans fascism is a fried in flavor 9 out of 10. To make an animated series, you have to go through a lot of steps. You have to storyboard, script, find voices for your characters, animate the episode, listen to studio notes, etc. So it baffles me that this episode managed to get through all those checks and balances and still get spat out. Bill is set up on a blind date with Charlene, a single mother played by Melinda Clarke of Nikita and the OC fame. They hit it off, and it isn't long before Charlene and her 2 kids are moving in with Bill, except her daughter rubs Dale the wrong way and he thinks she's some kind of pod person. He decides to steal her hair and does a DNA test at one of those convenient DNA analysis stores that offer 24-hour results, which are totally real places you can just walk into. Which is a weird thing to have to suspend your disbelief for, but whatever. Not the issue. Turns out her genetic makeup and Joseph show they have the same father. Therefore, obviously, Dale is her dad. Yeah, you know, the alien crop dusting caused Charlene and Nancy to get pregnant, and they're both Dale's kids. That's the most logical explanation. Dale is disgusted that his spawn is living at Bill's, where he's taking care of and watching the kids and loving his new family, and this is easily one of, if not the worst Dale episodes, and one of the worst episodes of the series. It baffles me this episode has such a high rating because I don't see how. Dale wants to get his kid out of there, so he sends John Redcorn to seduce Charlene and sleep with her behind Bill's back. Dale decides to run the risk of emotionally devastating his friend because aliens spread his seed. Yeah, turns out Charlene was actually Candy back in the day, and sure enough, John Redcorn is the dad of her daughter. The worst part is Joseph was falling for Charlene's daughter, aka his half-sister, so Peggy kept throwing Bobby outside to get in the way. If Bill was being horrible to them, that'd be one thing. If there was literally anything else, there could be justification for it at least being an option. But nope, Dale does one of the worst things imaginable for no good reason. John Redcorn has Charlene and the kids move in with him, so I guess at least he gets a happy ending out of all of this. Like, I'm not an overly sensitive person. I've seen my fair share of media. I like to be as open as possible. This episode is just insultingly bad. This episode laughs in the face of anyone that thought there was an emotional core to the show. If it's just a one-off adventure, I'd expect this from Family Guy, honestly, and it'd probably work better there, especially around this time period. This just isn't King of the Hill's comedy styling. Untitled Blake McCormick Project is an abducted 2 out of 10. Does anyone hear that buzzing? Sounds like static. Bobby wants to buy a game station, literally called a game station, because why not? He wants to shop around, and Hank tells him that he's got a guy for everything, and he'll show him what a firm handshake and a trusted salesman can do for you. Peggy needs a new car, so Hank decides to take Bobby to the dealership, where they run to Tom Hammond, played by Good Place architect and bar owner Ted Danson. Oh, and Doctor. People forget Becker existed. Show had 6 seasons and over 100 episodes. Anyway, Peggy haggles with Tom on a new convertible and actually gets him to take $2,500 off sticker, which back in 2008, that was a hefty chunk to take off. Well, Hank comes in ready to finish the deal and they fire off a cannon. He gets a handshake and sworn to secrecy that he never tell anyone about the great deal he got. When you look at joke writing, sometimes it's okay to go with the most obvious joke as your go-to. Sometimes the obvious answer is the funniest answer. And I truly and genuinely believe the first half of this episode is some of the best King of the Hill of the season. Hank, for over 20 years, has been paying sticker price for his cars. That right there, that's great. I love that. I love that the entire neighborhood mocks him for it. He's understandably upset that he's gotten taken advantage of, but it's such a Davy and Goliath in the real world story. He's so trusting to a fault, and he has been paying for it for decades without realizing it. That's the kind of stuff I love in King of the Hill. That's the kind of writing that just sings in my eyes. Hank is justifiably upset, so he prints off flyers at the local Kinko's and runs into a scraggly-haired guy, and they decide to join Hank's fight against the auto dealership. Hank arrives at 5 a.m. ready to put flyers on all the cars talking about Tom Hammond's slimy dealings. He runs into the guy as well as his friends, including someone named Falcon, who are crawling on their stomachs in ski masks. Remember, met them in a Kinko's. Hank thanks them for their work and drives off as the car lot goes up in flames. What? Yeah, these total strangers that never show up again just straight up blow a car lot up. Hank gets caught, the cops interrogate him, and then Tom comes in. Says Hank is innocent, so he'll stop coming after him, and the episode ends? What? Have Hank put flyers on all the cars, and then, his jacket gets caught on something and his name tag is found in the rubble after a gas leak explosion or something. Not just 3 randos blowing up a lot. The episode is such a disappointment, mostly because of how strong it starts. I will say the end where Bobby is trying to get the game station and the clerk gives him 20% off because his boss doesn't want his store blown up is really funny, but they never steer one way or another enough for it to feel earned. Hank never feels suspicious enough. He never seems maybe guilty like in High Anxiety. It feels so close to being one of the best episodes, and then just poof, it's up in smoke. Ted Danson is great though. Man is a generational talent. The Accidental is a price slashed 6 out of 10. I'm not gonna lie, these last Realtor episodes of Peggy's are really ironically funny, but we'll get into it. Enrique's daughter, Inez, is having a quinceañera, and Enrique wants Hank to give a speech, even though Buck really wanted to give it for some reason. I feel I'm better off not knowing. Inez is played by Alicia Sixtos, probably most famous for East Los High. And so Hank has to get to know Inez and learn what makes a 15-year-old girl tick. It's actually really kind of sweet that he tries to just listen and take in all the information once he gets her to open up. It's very reminiscent of how he bonded with Connie in Aisle 8A or The Bluegrass is Always Greener. He learns to care about what Inez is going through and really wants to make sure that he gives a speech deserving of a young girl turning into a young woman. Isn't that nice? Hank being invited to be a part of his co-worker's culture and celebrate his friend's daughter going through a major rite of passage? That's so cool. That is poggers, as the kids say. I'm so glad there's no B story or anything. Nothing to take away from that. Oh, no, there totally is. Man, that ringing is getting louder. Peggy is driving Asa around to show houses, Asa being played frustratingly well by Dax Shepard. Asa doesn't want the traditional boring suburban homes. He wants something that pops. He wants something with culture and heritage. So he buys a house next to Enrique's, and when Peggy sees that all of Asa's hipster friends want to move to the neighborhood, well, who is she to say no? It's not like a massive influx of new tenants and competitive pricing would force lower-income families out of their homes or anything. Yeah, Peggy does a wacky bit of gentrification, and Enrique can't afford his rent anymore, even breaking down at Inez's quinceañera, ruining it. Peggy wants to make things right and brings together as many neighbors as she can to make Enrique's neighborhood look like it's actually a family-centric, boring suburban neighborhood, scaring the hipsters away. And with some very funny hand-waving, Enrique buys the house he's been renting. Lady in Gentrification just makes you hate Peggy. She's the only source of conflict in the episode, and if she had just stopped and thought about what she was doing for just a second, or used any of that integrity she shamed the show from time to time, none of this would have happened. Now, granted, Enrique should have bought his house a long time ago and chose to keep renting to throw big parties, but man oh manity, that doesn't justify the rest of the episode happening. It's a parody of gentrification, and while it is a very accurate portrayal and a down-to-earth portrayal, South Park did it better. I don't know, at least in South Park there's ruins of the failed gentrification. Here, everything is just wrapped in 22 minutes again. If they just gave a conflict that Inez had to deal with Hank, it would have been a much stronger episode. Instead, it just kind of flounders. Lady in Gentrification is a small-town rustic, 4 out of 10. I swear, the ringing doesn't stop. It only gets louder. I just want peace. Be gone, cruel specter. Dooley runs off. You know, the same Dooley that pantsed Peggy and has been just a nuisance since his introduction. Well, this encourages a pop family dynamic author to come and speak to the parents of Arlen. Stevens Davies is played by Ed Begley Jr., who has been in, easily over 100 roles in his career. Everything from Arrested Development and Better Call Saul to St. Elsewhere and Young Sheldon. The man is storied and a great talent that can add a ton of flavor to any role he finds himself in. Too bad he doesn't do anything here. Peggy struts and brags about how Dooley's mom screwed up and how her family is at least better than that when Davies decides to make a public example of her. He asks if she knows what Bobby is doing in that moment. When she has no idea, he calls the house and it rings and rings before going to voicemail since Hank was outside grilling while his son was watching, and it's a very intentionally sweet scene. Like almost excessively so, but it works for what he's trying to prove. Also just shows how dated the episode is, since if Hank had a cell phone, boom, problem solved. TLDR, Peggy thinks she's a horrible mom now, they miss their photos with Ron, and Peggy wants them all to be more comfortable in their bodies and be more vulnerable with each other, even encouraging them to walk the house in their underwear. It's a social commentary on the rise of pop family books where basically, no matter what you were doing something wrong and traumatizing your kids or destroying your home. This was basically overtaken by mommy bloggers and family vlogs, and the rest is a wild and weird history. Unlike the Y2K episode that was about a genuine fear people around the globe had, Behind Closed Doors is just this weird, again very dull display of drama that just kind of fizzles. Hank confronts Davies and demands he tell Peggy she's a good mom, while Bobby bribes Dooley to run for it so his family can get a great family photo. Yeah, I'm glad the whole family is getting along, but also, the season could have just been 21 episodes instead of 22. You could have replaced this with just 22 minutes of Hank flipping a burger and it would have been better. Behind Closed Doors is a hollow, neglectful 4 out of 10. The brain fog is clearing. I feel clean. I can feel the rising sun upon my skin once more. Hark, for I am cleansed in its morning rays. Con gets a surprise visitor. His father-in-law. That's right, Min's dad, the general, has come to visit and just absolutely eviscerates Con for not being good enough for his daughter. He's been around in the series for so long, but I really need to commend James C's performance as the general. The man is incredibly talented and actually makes his general feel like this just massive, imposing force. This is the guy that screamed "My cabbages" in Avatar. The man knows what's up, and I am about it. I just feel that tension come off your shoulders. Here you are with one of the best Con episodes ever and one of the best episodes of the season. Con brags about everything he has and everything he is because he's constantly put down. The general actually makes you feel for Con. And when Con doesn't feel welcome in his own home, he goes to a karaoke bar and blows everyone away. We've seen that he loves to sing and everything, and now we're getting a payoff for it. There really does have to be a morning after. His friends and work are impressed, Hank and the gang are impressed. The only person that isn't impressed is, of course, the general, who is upset that his daughter and granddaughter are actually proud of and supportive of Con. How dare? How dare Min support the man she loves? I'll say this, I love that Min stands up for Con. She's daddy's girl, absolutely, but she never throws Con under the bus and does still stay by his side. I don't know, you can hate Con in some episodes, but you can never say his family doesn't love him. They really, truly do, and I don't know, it makes you feel for the guy. He gets asked to sing at a gala, and wouldn't you know it, the general insists on singing too. And he proceeds to lead with Con's song, completely throwing him off, so he totally falls apart on stage and enters a crippling depression. Man, I wonder if he's had to deal with that before or something. That really would add an extra depth to his character. Min confronts her dad and tells him to fix everything, and the general basically just tells Con he's worthless, but he'll leave so he can save face, and then, yeah, he leaves. I don't know, it's sort of like Death Picks Cotton. You never get the satisfaction of Con getting that attaboy from his father-in-law, but hey, he's got his wife, he's got his daughter, he's got the best life on the block, and that's good enough for him. Pour some sugar on Con makes Con a relatable and personable character. We've seen how he and Min met up back in Father of the Bribe, but to see how steadfast she is in her love for him, to see Connie be proud of her dad who was always pushing her, I don't know. They really seem to work in this episode, and I love it. I haven't even talked about the B story, and it's not even because it's bad. Peggy and Bobby make a bunch of inconsequential bets about the dumbest things and throw out rewards like bragging rights and compliments. It's just a fun, innocent side story where a mom is doing something dumb with her son. That's great. All of this is great. This episode revitalizes you. It makes you think you can get through the rest of the season. Pour Some Sugar on Khan is a pitch perfect 10 out of 10. Did you know karaoke means empty orchestra? Hey, there's that buzzing again. I know I mentioned it back in Lady and Gentrification, but didn't go in depth on why the Realtor episodes are so funny this season, yet I actually think that this episode is the better example. Things are tight at Sizemore Realty. People are struggling to buy homes, so every listing is worth its weight in gold. So funny story, this episode actually aired April 6th of 2008. Later in 2008, the famous 2008 housing crisis would happen, where banks would default and fail. So yeah, no duh, realtors had it rough. They were right on the fringe of an economic bubble. Peggy gets a listing that houses some very eccentric characters, and so she decides to get some actors to stage the place. Frank, played by, and I can't believe this is his first time on the show, much less he's not even in an episode with David Allen, the other half of the Naked Trucker and T-Bone crew, but it's David Koechner. And Melrose, played by Abby Elliott, who, fun fact, is the daughter of Chris Elliott, who plays Chris Sizemore in the episode, and she's in The Beast, and one of the first second-generation SNL members since her dad was also in SNL. This is more interesting than the episode, trust me. Oh, and Bud Ferguson is a home inspector that Hank admires and looks up to. I want to say he's a light caricature of Mike Holmes, but I'm probably reading way too much into it. Peggy puts together a play to show off the house and even puts on a soft showing at her house where she wows a guy into putting an offer on her home through Chris, and Peggy says yes. Peggy sells her family's home without even bothering to pick their brains on it. Peggy is just this horrible toss-up character at this point. You have no idea what she's going to be on any given day. The only way they can get out of the sale is if they mess their house up well enough that the inspector can't give them a passing grade. And so Hank, through absolutely no fault of his own, literally just trying to mind his own business, now has to tear apart the home he's loved for years because his wife made a knee-jerk reaction to sell it. How is that fair to the poor man? Like, I know it was a joke having him break down as he was hammering his rain gutter, but when you watch the episode, I don't know, it doesn't feel funny, it just feels sad. It would be funny if it was a comeuppance, but he didn't do anything. If he was standing in Peggy's way or something, hey, that's narrative, that's conflict, but he just asked to be left alone with her antics and he got dragged in anyway. Bud does his walk through the house and sure enough it fails. However, he's not stupid and he does commend Hank for his masterful upkeep and partial demolition of his home. He gives him one of the greatest compliments he could ever receive. It's a really wholesome moment for Hank. I just wish that it didn't happen like this. But it is sweet there's at least something there. It makes the episode end on a high note, which is better than some. Also, Glenn Morshower is so weird to hear so frequently in the show, but I don't know, he's an unsung legend of the recurring cast. Man brings it every time he pops up. 6 characters in search of a house is an economic bubble bursting 3 out of 10. We are so close to the end. We're so close to never having to look back at the season again. I thought I was through the worst of the show. I thought it was all uphill from Hank's bully. I was wrong, gang. So wrong. Joseph is really good at football. So good, in fact, he's been scouted by Spencer Academy, who wants him to be their star quarterback and they'll build the team around him. Naturally, Dale sees dollar signs and starts milking the scouting as much as he can while coaxing Joseph to pick the academy. Hank is upset with Dale because he wants Joseph to stay at Tom Landry and play for them so they have a fighting chance this season. Neither is in the right at all. Let's not kid ourselves. Joseph has some issues he needs some extra help with. Spencer Academy should be a place where he could get the attention he needs to thrive. That could be really helpful for him if, they weren't only focused on sports. But they make a child get in front of a bunch of grown men and announce where he's going to go because that's something to put on a child's shoulders. He says he wants to stick with Tom Landry, and then boom, Dale snatches the mic and says he's going to Spencer Academy after all because his opinion doesn't matter. Yeesh. Dale and Nancy go to a gala where they are a little outspent by literally everyone there, which is really odd considering Nancy is a pretty big news celebrity. Just seems like people would know who she is there, and yet it's all about Dale and his Dumb and Dumber best. When Dale sees that he can't provide Joseph with the money and life he deserves, he sends him to live with one of the recruiters. The recruiter then naturally proceeds to drop Joseph off at home, and when Joseph, Dale's son, is pounding on the door to get let in, Dale sends him away only for Hank to bring Joseph home. Dale is overjoyed when Joseph comes home and gets re-enrolled in Tom Landry, and Dale throws a gala to pay off what he owes Spencer Academy, and the episode ends resolved. Okay, but there wasn't really a resolution. Dale did a lot of really messed up stuff, and they just go with the easiest answer possible because they have 87 seconds to wrap everything up. The courtship of Joseph's father is another wheel-spinning episode that just has Dale being wacky for the sake of being wacky. Give me something more, I'm begging you. This episode made my eyes pulse. This is a rough one. The courtship of Joseph's father is a last draft pick, 3 out of 10. The episode opens with the family being held hostage as they're being robbed at a Party Bear establishment, all showing that Peggy has had a long line of miserable birthdays. This year, she's decided they're gonna do a murder mystery train ride instead. Dale is so excited to see Peggy's birthday just completely implode. I think how you feel about this episode is purely determined based off the episodes you watched before it. If you watch good Peggy episodes, you really truly feel for her. If you watch this season Peggy, her horrible birthdays feel like justice for the horrible things she's done. It's a bit of a toss-up. Well, everyone gets on the train and Luanne is pulled aside to be one of the actors since one couldn't make it. Luanne asks Peggy a question and gives away the mystery surprise, and Dale announces who did it for the whole train to hear, ruining the entire event with a giant smile on his face. They bring up Roy Cohn, someone who would really hate if you Googled them. Seriously, one of the worst things Dale could have done, but hey, at least he didn't send John Redcorn to break up the Hill House. The refrigeration failed, and so while miserable eating cheese and crackers, Hank and Peggy go off for some private exploring and they have a little birthday fun. That does leave bare footprints on a mirror and a new mystery for the gang to solve. Who canoodled in the Iron Noodle? Lucky, using his TV land detective prowess, tries to figure it out while Khan runs through the suspects. They get kicked off the train for messing with the conductor to try and destroy evidence, head to a biker bar, the bikers are surprisingly cool, and that's it. Meanwhile, the B story is Bobby, Connie, and Joseph search the house for a new hangout spot until they crawl under the house to drink soda and chill, which might be the most 12-year-old thing I've seen in a minute. Like so many Bobby stories or romanticized adventures of a 12-year-old boy, this is them going under a house as a chill zone. That is unadulterated kid nonsense, and I love it. Strangeness on a Train does admittedly have some heart to it, and it's not a horrible episode by any means. It's just Dale being the worst and Peggy being miserable. The episode does drag, especially in the beginning, weirdly enough. Like, even the robbery feels padded. And it's just another episode that you feel like could have resolved itself in like 15 minutes, but they had to stretch it to last. It's disappointing because the elements are there for a really solid episode. I don't know. Strangeness on a Train is a piston pumping 7 out of 10. When Dooley yeets a can at the school officer, Principal Moss thinks it was Bobby and forces Bobby to spend time with the cop to see his side of things. Who's the cop? You guessed it, Officer Brown! I would honestly say this is another vignette episode. Peggy gets Hank an autographed picture of the Cowboys, but recognizes one of the signatures is fake and goes down to the Metro Park to get their money back. Dale gets hired at Not Hooters and is just waiting for them to fire him because he's a man so he can sue. He starts giving desserts and appetizers away for free and getting way better tips because of it. And when Hank is upset that they got screwed over, a guy bumps into him and he's confident the guy stole his wallet. So he runs up to the guy and demands the wallet before walking off. This sets the guy off and he goes all Michael Douglas and falling down, ready to get even with Hank one way or another. Hank does himself no favors by being as cryptic as possible every time he calls him, never even offering a genuine apology for some reason. Again, it's that age-old gem of miscommunication is the laziest source of conflict. Hey, I'm so sorry, I took your wallet thinking it was my own. Please know that I just want to return your wallet to you and all your stuff is still in it. Boom, short and sweet. A message like that and literally the entire conflict of the episode could be dodged. The Dale story feels like it wasn't fleshed out enough for an A or B story, so they just kind of threw it in there. And as Bobby sits in a cleaning closet, he convinces Officer Brown, the man that took bribes and wanted to put down dogs, to go out and pick up truant kids like Dooley and get his spark back. Bobby, that isn't the move, bud. Like, don't make it Officer Brown if you're gonna do that story. Also, it's incredibly odd that of all the elements this season, the only one that gets built on is Officer Brown. Like, why? Whose favorite character is Officer Brown? Officer Brown stands, please fight for him in the comments. The guy, Barry Rollins, starts working out and goes to attack Hank with a bat. Hank, Bill, and Boomhauer run away from him. Now, okay, Hank, Bill, and Boomhauer are all former football players. Hank is not a small man. Barry Rollins is a scrawny guy with an aluminum bat, swinging it wildly with one arm, so it can't be swinging with any amount of sizable power. Would old Hank run from him like that? It just feels like a joke chase scene for no reason. Give the dude, a pistol or something, even if it's fake. Make it believable that Hank would run from him. Hank has over a foot on the guy, and it's 3 versus 1, with one of his being military trained. Cops and Robert is the weakest of the vignette episodes and makes me miss Mutual of Omaha like it was an old friend. It doesn't do anything particularly inventive, and what it does do, it does in the laziest way imaginable. Cops and Robert is a slow-speed chase, 4 out of 10. It's time for the Garage Boat Regatta! Bobby is actually excited about building a boat, and so Hank decides that this year, instead of building one with the gang, he's going to have a genuine bonding moment with his son. The gang doesn't take it well and treats him like the enemy, for wanting to spend time with his son. However, when Hank and Bobby are working on the boat and Hank is trying to teach him about boats, he runs into a bat and runs out of the garage, holding the door behind him, trapping Bobby with the bat. Hank is afraid of bats. Everyone finds out that Hank is afraid of bats and mocks him while Bobby starts to get an inflated ego and does shoddy craftsmanship on the boat. Dale and the gang put a giant bat on their boat to scare Hank. And so when Bobby goes to test his boat, it starts to sink immediately and he starts to panic. When the going gets tough, though, the tough get going, and Hank rushes to save Bobby and their tiki hut boat. He tries to refit the buoyancy issues and faces his fear as they move under a bridge covered in bats. I don't know, maybe it's because I've gotten to hold them, or because rhetoric around bats has changed considerably in 15 years, as information has come out about how vital they are to their ecosystems and the importance of their conservation. Not to mention, they're just cute little flying dogs, but I just don't get Hank's massive fear around them. They even animate the bat that's been tormenting him as just this little harmless funny guy, which is obviously the point, I know, but it's just, I don't know. The man has a lot of justifiable fears, but that one isn't it. If Hank never wanted to go in the ocean or see a dolphin again, hey, I don't blame the guy. But a bat is what shakes him to his core? It's not just outlandish, it's just kind of unbelievable. We've seen him deal with other phobias and get over them, like, just randomly blowing up, and now here it's bats. I like that Bobby goes mad with power. I just wish he was doing it to convince his dad to get out of his funk. We've seen Bobby do little 4D chess moves like that in the past, but that might be too complicated for end of season Bobby to do. It Came from the Garage is forgettable. Is it bad? It's not good, but it's not nearly as bad as, say, Tears of an Inflatable Clown. If it aired in an earlier season, I think I wouldn't dislike it as much. The rising action and the conclusion are strong, but the middle is just a stretched out slog. It Came from the Garage is a supersonic 6 out of 10. And here we are, the season finale. For the second to last season of the show, you'd think they'd try and bring on as much guest talent as possible, but this season was really muted on the celebrity appearances. Ironically, this season was actually the season that viewership started to increase for the show after a pretty steady decline in popularity. The B story is quick and easy. Dale is building a watchtower in his backyard that Con absolutely hates, and I honestly don't blame him. Dale is building it within all the allowed perimeters, but that means it has no foundation or support and is way too narrow and would ultimately get tipped over with little effort. Yeah. And now the meat and cheese. Lucky wants to do right by Luanne and his kids, so he asks Hank to help him get his affairs in order. Driver's license, tax documents, all that good stuff. Hank, proud of Lucky, agrees to help him. Oh look, Hank is willing to help Lucky better himself for his family and Luanne, his wife. Just makes Peggy look that much worse. Speaking of Peggy, she gets a call from her brother Hoyt, and he's coming to Arlen. Perfect casting is very, very rare. But when it happens, when you catch lightning in a bottle, it elevates the character into a whole new experience entirely. If Hoyt was voiced by David Herman, he wouldn't be nearly as memorable. No, Hoyt would be played by returning great Johnny Knoxville, who absolutely brings it. His last character in Business is Picking Up was solid, but they were clean-cut, cool, and professional. Hoyt wasn't on an oil rig. He was in prison. He's a drunk, a deadbeat, and a serial offender, and Johnny Knoxville imbues him with the kind of charisma only he can. He makes it believable that people would fall for his tricks over and over again. And so, yeah, Luanne's dad is finally home and gets to meet his new son-in-law, and they get along like gangbusters. However, Lucky may be stupid, but he's not dumb, and he knows someone that got out of the state or federal oil rig when he sees them. Naturally, he keeps it a secret from Luanne to not upset her, because that's who Lucky is, but when he goes out with his father-in-law for pancakes and they dine and dash, he ultimately gets arrested and attempts to take the fall for Hoyt, so Luanne can at least still have her dad. And Hoyt is all ready for Lucky to take the fall for him, but he's convinced by Hank and Peggy to do the right thing and go back to the oil rig to save Lucky. Ironically, the thing I love most about this episode is how little Luanne is in it. I just want to pretend like last season was the last we saw of her, so she isn't spoiling murder mysteries or telling old ladies to be reincarnated as her baby. Let me pretend she got her happy ending and the series didn't keep going. Alas, here we are. I'll say this about Luanne though. A lot of episodes this season just have her sitting at the dinner table like nothing ever happened. Lucky isn't joining them or anything, it just feels like they forgot what they were doing with her. Passage of time and whatnot, but Luanne has been pregnant for 2 seasons, and even at your most liberal definition of the passage of time, there's no way the last 2 seasons happened in less than 10 months. The writers forgot how to handle Luanne, so she's just treated as this adult child when she had a character. She had an identity. It's just sad to see how one-dimensional she's become. I would have loved seeing the Luanne from Texas City Twister reunite with her dad, or the Luanne right after Buckley's Angel. Here it just feels like she lives in her own little world and she can't be touched by the real world lest she wilt like a julep. I appreciate that Lucky and Peggy are always looking out for her, and it does show they love her in their own ways, but great googly moogly, give her some of her autonomy back. Life, a Loser's Manual is a great episode that showcases the flaws with the series at this point. Tom Petty absolutely brings it with an emotional turn on Lucky that gives you a truly humbling experience. Johnny Knoxville, again, absolutely dynamite. It's a well-structured season finale that has finale-sized stakes and handles them brilliantly. Life, a Loser's Manual is 9 prison dollars out of 10. And there we have it, that's season 12! Anything you think I was wrong on? Right on? What was your favorite episode? Least favorite? Let me know in the comments below. And if you liked what you saw, make sure to like, subscribe, and tell your friends we're out here. Season 12 was equal parts a fun little jaunt through late-stage King of the Hill and mind-numbing ego death inducing nothing. I say this with love for the show in my heart. At the end of the day, how many shows make it to 12 seasons? Much less 13. The fact there are still strong episodes to celebrate even as we turn the corner on the last season is incredible in its own right. But naturally, we're not done just yet. We still have one more season before we're done with the original run. We'll get episodes that didn't air until Adult Swim, some very dated social media, and a capstone episode for one of Ireland's most beloved entrepreneurs. So I'll see you next time when we careen into season 13. Goodbye, everybody. Thank you so much for watching, and know that you matter. Stay strong, keep fighting, and know that things will get better. Even if all you did was wake up today, know that I am proud of you. You got this.